Yo, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are doing something a little different. We are jumping into a time machine. We are looking at a book that is technically history, but feels terrifyingly like reading the morning news. The book is 1929 by Andrew Ross Sorkin. Now, you might know Sorkin. He's the guy who wrote Too Big to Fail, which was the definitive book on the 2008 financial crisis. Well, he decided that 2008 was just the sequel, and he wanted to investigate the original horror movie. So he went back to the great crash of 1929. And let me tell you, this book is not a dry history lesson. It is a story about ego, greed, and the absolute delusion that happens when people think they have discovered an infinite money glitch. If you are listening to this, you are probably interested in money or history or just watching train wrecks in slow motion. And that is exactly what this is. Sorkin paints this picture of Wall Street not as a bunch of numbers on a ticker tape, but as a room full of guys who thought they were gods until gravity kicked in. So I have broken this book down into the core lessons that Sorkin lays out. We are going to walk through the party, the hangover, and the lessons you need to learn so you do not end up selling apples on a street corner the next time the market corrects. Let's get into it. Lesson 1 is what I like to call the new era, or the "this time is different" delusion. Sorkin starts by setting the scene of the late 1920s, and the vibe was electric. You have to understand the context. America had just come out of World War I. We were the global superpower. Innovation was exploding. You had radio bringing information instantly to people's homes, which was basically the internet of its day. You had cars becoming affordable. Cities were building skyscrapers. It felt like humanity had leveled up. And because of all this technology, everyone on Wall Street convinced themselves of one very dangerous idea. They thought that the old cycles of boom and bust were over. They called it the new plateau. They literally believed that stock prices would just go up forever because the world had fundamentally changed. Think about how crazy that sounds. But we do this all the time. Think about the dot-com bubble in the late 90s. Everyone said, profits do not matter because it's the internet. Or think about the crypto craze or the AI boom. Every few decades, we convince ourselves that the laws of physics and finance no longer apply because we have cool new gadgets. Sorkin introduces us to these titans of industry, guys like Charles Mitchell, who was the head of National City Bank. These guys were rock stars. They were telling the public that there was no ceiling, and the public ate it up. The lesson here is simple. Whenever you hear someone say, "This time is different," run for the hills. That phrase is the bat signal for a financial catastrophe. If your Uber driver or your dentist is giving you stock tips based on a vibe that the market only goes up, you are in the danger zone. Lesson 2 is the leverage trap, or betting with money you do not have. This is the mechanics of how the crash got so bad. Sorkin explains that the 1920s introduced the average American to the stock market. Before this, stocks were for rich guys in top hats. But suddenly, you had regular people, factory workers, maids, teachers, dumping their life savings into the market. But here's the kicker. They weren't just using their savings. They were buying on margin. Now, for those who don't speak finance, buying on margin is basically borrowing money to gamble. In 1929, you could buy $100 worth of stock with only $10 in cash. You borrowed the other 90 from the broker. It sounds great when the market is going up. You put down $10, the stock goes to 200, you double your money on a tiny investment. It's the original leverage. It's like buying a Lamborghini on a credit card because you're sure you'll win the lottery next week to pay it off. Sorkin shows how this created a house of cards, because when everyone is leveraged to the eyeballs, a small drop doesn't just mean you lose profit, it means you get a margin call. The broker calls you up and says, "Hey, the stock dropped, you need to give me more cash right now or I'm selling everything." Since nobody had the cash, the broker sold the stocks. That made the prices drop more, which triggered more margin calls, which caused more selling. It's a doom loop. The takeaway here is about fragility. The system looked strong, but it was brittle because it was built on debt. It's like dating someone who seems totally together, but they're one bad text message away from a complete meltdown. Leverage makes you look rich until it makes you broke. Lesson 3 is the echo chamber, or the failure of the gatekeepers. One of the most fascinating parts of Sorkin's book is his focus on the people who are supposed to be the adults in the room. You have the Federal Reserve, you have the big bankers, you have the politicians in Washington. Sorkin paints this incredible picture of the conflict between Washington and Wall Street. The Federal Reserve actually saw the bubble forming. They knew it was bad. They wanted to raise interest rates to cool it down, but they were scared. They were scared of crashing the party. There's this great tension in the book where the regulators are basically whispering, "Stop it," while the bankers are screaming, "Party on." And then you have the media. Sorkin talks about how the newspapers and the financial gurus were cheering the market on. There were only a few people sounding the alarm, guys like Roger Babson, who famously predicted the crash. But do you know what happened to the people who predicted the crash? They were mocked. They were called un-American. They were the party poopers. It's exactly like when you have that one friend who tells you that your new business idea of selling ice to Eskimos is stupid. You don't listen to him. You cut him out of your life because you want good vibes only. The lesson here is that you can't trust the consensus just because everyone agrees. In 1929, the smartest men in the room, the most powerful bankers, and the government were all wrong. They were all caught in a groupthink bubble where they reinforced each other's delusions. Sorkin shows that just because a guy is wearing a three-piece suit and runs a bank doesn't mean he knows what's going to happen next Tuesday. Lesson 4 is the psychology of panic. Now we get to the scary part, the crash itself. Sorkin writes this like a thriller. You could feel the sweat in the room. It starts in late October 1929. The market gets a little shaky. Then on Black Thursday, the floor drops out. Sorkin describes the scene on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Imagine the room full of men screaming. The ticker tape, which was the machine that printed out the stock prices, literally couldn't keep up. It was running hours behind. Think about how terrifying that is. Imagine checking your banking app and it says loading for 4 hours while you know your money is disappearing. Nobody knew what the real prices were. People were selling blind. There's a story Sorkin tells about the top bankers meeting across the street at JP Morgan's office. They tried to save the market. They pooled their money together and marched onto the floor to buy stocks at high prices to show confidence. It was a power move. They were trying to say, look, we're not scared. And it worked for like a day. But then came Black Tuesday. And this time, the dam broke. The volume of selling was so high that no amount of banker money could stop it. Sorkin captures the human element here perfectly. He talks about the rumors, people whispering that big investors had committed suicide, crowds gathering outside the stock exchange like it was a funeral. The lesson here is that markets aren't math. Markets are psychology. When fear takes over, logic leaves the building. It doesn't matter what a company is actually worth. If everyone wants to sell at the same time, the price goes to zero. It's the ultimate FOMO, but in reverse. It's the fear of being the last guy holding the bag. Lesson 5 is the illusion of control. This is the big philosophical point of the book. Sorkin contrasts the arrogance of the 1920s with the helplessness of the 1930s. These men thought they controlled the economy. They thought they had levers and dials they could turn to fix things. But once the trust was gone, the machine stopped working. Sorkin details how the crash spilled over into the real economy. It wasn't just rich guys losing their yachts. Companies couldn't get loans, so they fired workers. Workers had no money, so they stopped buying stuff. Factories closed, banks failed, and took regular people's savings because there was no FDIC insurance back then. It's a brutal reminder that finance is the circulatory system of the world. If the heart stops pumping the blood, the fingers and toes, that's us regular people, start dying off. Sorkin's narrative really drives home that these masters of the universe were just as confused as everyone else. They held meetings, they issued statements, they tried to be optimistic, but they were sweeping back the ocean with a broom. So what's the conclusion? What do we take away from this stroll through the ruins of 1929? Sorkin's book is not just a history of what happened. It's a mirror. He wants us to look at 1929 and see the reflection of our own time. We live in an era of high tech, high leverage, and high confidence. We have influencers telling us to buy the dip. We have governments printing money to keep things afloat. We have the feeling that technology will save us from economics. But 1929 teaches us that human nature doesn't change. Greed is undefeated. Fear is undefeated. The cool older brother advice here is don't believe the hype. When things seem too good to be true, they usually are. Understand that the crowd can be wrong even if the crowd includes the experts. And for the love of everything holy, do not bet the house on a hot tip you got from a guy who knows a guy. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes. Sorkin's 1929 is a reminder that the music
eventually stops. And when it does, you want to make sure you have a chair. Read this book if you want to understand why your grandfather keeps cash under his mattress. It is a masterpiece of financial horror and a guidebook for survival. Thanks for listening. Keep your head on a swivel, and I will catch you in the next one.